Conservatarianmedia.com.
Good morning, boys and girls. Bucky Dillon Show, hosted by myself, Bucky Dillon, our morning show. Because this is a collaborative between myself and the freedom-loving, free-thinking, independent-minded, free speech advocating, patriot community in Northern Colorado tuning in on the radio broadcast and all across the country tuning in on the YouTube channel and all around the world, I suppose, except for in the countries my station is, my YouTube channel is blocked in North Korea, Iran, Syria, and Cuba. Probably China, just because they don't have YouTube in China. But it's going to be a great day. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling much better than I was yesterday. I was really tired. Today, I would like to break down the difference between the Conservatarian, which is I don't know if I've heard the word before, but I use the word, kind of a combination of conservative and libertarian. They seem to align on a few things. But I consider myself kind of conservatarian in philosophy. So the difference between the conservatarian movement, the conservatarian philosophy, and the progressive philosophy, and why I have chosen the conservatarian side. Not the Republican Party, by the way, not Republican politicians, but the conservative, libertarian governing philosophy. But first, we're going to get into the forecast in Northern Colorado. You're on the YouTube live stream. I suppose this doesn't apply to you, but it certainly applies to my listeners driving to work here in Northern Colorado in Fort Collins. Tuesday, January 12th, 6:07 in the morning. It is currently 17 degrees with winds coming from the northwest at 2 miles an hour. Humidity is 66 degrees. But for the most part, it's going to be a sunny day until about 1 in the afternoon. It's going to get up to about 50 degrees. No chance of rain. Very mild winds. Partly cloudy from about 1 p.m. on throughout the rest of the night, and it'll drop down pretty dang chilly before the end of the night. On this day in history, something for you to talk with your friends about at work. In 1528, Gustav I of Sweden, crowned King of Sweden, rules for 37 years and becomes known as the Father of the Nation. In 1554, excuse my lack of being able to pronounce it, Bayin-Yang, crowned King of Burma, goes on to assemble the largest empire in the history of Southeast Asia. That's pretty interesting. In 1872, Johannes IV is crowned Emperor of Ethiopia in Aksum, first imperial coronation in Aksum in over 200 years. In 1948, Mahatma Gandhi begins his final fast. That's interesting. In 2010, earthquake devastates Haiti, killing approximately 160,000 and destroying the majority of the capital, Port-au-Prince. So those are just a few things that happened on this day, January 12th, in history. Now, to jump right into the day. Why do I consider myself a conservative, a libertarian, a conservatarian versus a progressive? Now, at one point, I did consider myself a progressive. Why? And what's the difference between the two parties? Well, the two governing philosophies. I would like to start with the left. Obviously, the left now controls the White House and the Congress, and they now are able to implement almost any policy their heart's desire, as long as it's not so radical that the Supreme Court stops it. But hey, they might be able to pack the Supreme Court now too, and who knows if there is any level of radicalism they deem too much, because I think at the core of this governing philosophy is the belief that the means will justify the ends. So we have a conflict of visions. And there are political thinkers that date back all the way to Kant, all the way to Rousseau. We have Edmund Burke and Thomas Paine. And they all battled about what we should assume about human nature and about the capacity of government versus the free market. Right? So obviously, as the left exists today, they are considered to be the party of more government regulation. They believe that they can utilize the power of government to implement justice. They believe that through communal effort, organized through political means, they can solve just about any injustice in society. Whereas conservatives believe that the role of government is to protect the freedoms of the people and facilitate the basic infrastructure to keep society stable and functioning efficiently, but otherwise things need to be up to the maximum extent left up to the people. Here's the problem with the left-wing philosophy and the idea that the answer to every problem is more government. Coming up after the break, you're listening to the Bucky Dillon Show, our morning show, a collaborative between myself and the free-thinking, freedom-loving, free speech advocating community in Northern Colorado and all around the world, tuning in on the website 1360khnc.com, youtube.com/.
Join us and don't miss a moment of the Alex Jones Show, your number one source for real independent media. Find out what the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. InfoWars is pro-America, pro-family, pro-freedom. We are rebooting 1776. Exclusive reports, live coverage, information you won't find anywhere else. Tomorrow's news today. Stay informed by listening to KHNC 1360 AM.
Alex is here 1 o'clock, Monday through Friday, right here on the Roar of the Rockies.
You can buy gold just about anywhere in the world from all kinds of different dealers. So why do you use the Patriot Trading Group?
20 years of service, just like that. A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, just like that. Lowest prices, just like that. No solicitation, just like that. Buying or selling, just like that.
For all your gold and silver needs, call the Patriot Trading Group at 800-951-0592, just like that.
We're all doing a lot. A lot of swiping, streaming, watching, scrolling, double tapping, emoji picking, and social media stalking. A lot of nothing. You're probably scrolling right now. While we believe a certain red heart is giving us life, we're neglecting the one that actually does. Let's take a stand against sitting. Let's care more about strolling than scrolling. Let's take charge of our health. Let's make moves together, starting now. Visit heart.org/makemoves.
If your part of Rocky Mountain Paradise has been waiting to burn for 100 years, this fall you should call Affordable Tree Service North at 568-6898. I have 3 houses fire went around, and Rob's handiwork saved 4 miles of Boulder Mountain Lodge. We can get raging fire to drop out of the trees long before it gets too close to home. If the fire marshal flagged the drive or you're worried about the power lines, call 568-6898.
I'm a tree cutting man.
So one of the fundamental differences between the left and the right is the trust of the capacity for government to solve injustices and the role for government to solve injustices. So one example is this, is you will hear that they'll debate what the actual meaning of freedom means, right? The right will say that that freedom means that the government doesn't get in your way, that the government leaves you alone. And the left will say, right, but if there isn't a structure in which people can actually exceed, are you really free? Do you really have the freedom to access healthcare if healthcare is too expensive for you to afford it? Are you really free if your rent is so expensive that you can't save any money and get your feet off the ground, right? So the right believes the freedom to, and the left believes in many ways the freedom from. Well, I guess it's the other way around too. It's a little inconsistent here, guys, because now we have the right also says you have the freedom from government compulsion, but the left will say, well, you have the freedom to healthcare, or freedom to housing, or freedom from fear of gun violence, or whatever it is. But the basic notion that the government can solve your problems. But here's the problem. The only difference between a private market and the government is that the government has the gun behind it, right? Every government law, every government regulation is enforced by the barrel of a gun at the end of the day. So say that the government passes a regulation that I have to pay someone $15 an hour, or I can't hire them, right? What they're essentially saying is that if me and somebody agree that they will work for me for $10 an hour, and I hire them for $10 an hour, the government will then insist that I pay them $15 or that I fire them. Well, let's say that I don't want to fire them and I can't afford to pay them $15, so I just keep paying them $10. Well, then government agents are going to show up and they're basically going to attempt to force me to pay that. And if I resist, they're going to send police officers to enforce it. And if I resist that, the police officers are going to arrest me. And if I resist the police, they're going to point a gun at me. The left says they don't like guns, but the left loves guns, because the left is the party of higher taxes and more regulations and government enforced monopolies on specific industries like healthcare and education. And if you try to go around that, they will point a gun at you. The left isn't against guns. The left just wants to have a monopoly on guns. Here's the problem with government programs, right? They typically don't function well. And the same goes for private institutions, right? They typically don't function well. But the difference is if a private industry is failing and losing money, they'll go out of business. A government program, on the other hand, the answer is always the same. Well, if only we had more money. That's your money, by the way. That's what they're referring to. They're referring to your money. Anytime they say, we need more government funding or single payer funding, what they really mean is we need to forcibly confiscate wealth from people so that we can pay for it. Oh, and of course, they're going to skim a little bit off the top so they can pay themselves, right? And of course, the people they hire to run these programs are going to be their buddies, right? And they're not going to do it in a competitive way. I mean, I really like when AOC is grilling military contractors for charging $1,600 for non-vehicular clutch discs that cost $32 to make, and the military is buying them in bulk at $1,600 a month. I like to see her doing that. I hate wasteful government spending. But she's not going to do that in education. She's not going to do that in healthcare. She just selectively chooses when she wants to enforce it. And that's the problem with government, is they will selectively choose. Once they have a monopoly, they selectively choose who they will reward and who they will punish. And, you know, libertarians like to say that taxes are theft. Taxes are not theft. Theft is when somebody steals an item from you. Taxes are stealing your labor, right? Taxes are not theft. Taxes are slavery. Taxes are another day you need to spend as an indentured servant to the government, at the behest of government. So the problem with the government program, and we see this with schools, with healthcare, with welfare programs, all of these things, is the harder the program fails, the stronger their case for more government funding is. So it's the opposite of what you would want, right? You would hope that programs that run efficiently would expand that model so we could have the most efficient programs. But instead, what we have is the more a government program fails, the stronger their case is to approach their to Congress and say, well, we need more funding. It's never, we need to introduce competition to see if somebody has a better way of running things. In fact, typically it's, we need to get rid of our competition. We need more government funding, right? We've spent $23 trillion on the war on poverty as of, I want to say 2016, maybe 2012. I may be wrong. We've spent in the mid 20 trillions on the war on poverty. And poverty levels remain essentially the same. But all of the root causes of poverty have gotten worse. Now, if you try to take this away, they're going to say, you're taking away food stamps from single mothers, well, they'll surely starve. Well, maybe if you weren't crushing their job opportunities because you're taxing every business in order to pay for these food stamp programs, these businesses would be able to grow and expand and have job opportunities. Right? So do you see what I'm saying here is there's an over-reliance on government on the left. But I think the scariest part isn't even the failure of government programs. The scariest part is there is no endpoint of the path that well-intentioned liberalism leads you down, right? Conservatives have a very clear endpoint. They point to the Constitution and say this is the role of government. It's meant to protect your freedoms and provide just enough of the social and economic infrastructure that people can thrive and live in safety. But on the left, there is no such logical endpoint other than full-blown communism, top-down authoritarian control of everything. Because anytime anybody on the left says something like the people should control this, or the people should be in charge of this, what they really mean is political representatives. What they really mean is somebody in Congress. Now, given that Congress has a 9% approval rating, how effectively do you feel like our political representatives are representing us? They act like if you oppose the socialist strategy, that you are inherently greedy. Are the people running our government not greedy? Are the left-wing politicians in charge of these programs not greedy? They're still human beings. So these are the same people. human beings are greedy. And when you give them a government monopoly and a monopoly on the use of force, you expect that they're going to become less greedy? It's so interesting for me to hear Bernie Sanders and the other progressives rail against the tyranny of our government, rail against how the government has done this against the people and the government has done that against the people. And their solution to it is more government control. And what they forget is, in a private free market system, the private industries are controlled by the people because that's where they spend their money. Now, it's really interesting to hear the left celebrating big tech censoring conservative voices, right? Number one, it's hypocritical and ironic because they were celebrating all the riots earlier this year. And although I disagreed with what happened to the Capitol, and I did a whole episode about how that was stupid and unpatriotic and counterproductive, I will concede that I would at least rather see people who are upset with the political establishment take it out on the political establishment instead of going into downtown Minneapolis and burning down their neighbors' stores. There were hardly any dissenters in the political party when they were out there setting up full-on autonomous zones. For weeks. Months of protesting, billions and billions of dollars in both damage to physical infrastructure, but destruction of personal lives. I would much rather see people go into the Capitol building and send them a message that, hey, we're pretty upset with you, than to go into Target. And I made the case earlier that that was totally counterproductive. You know why? Because you're destroying the property values in that community. The schools are funded by the property value, by property taxes. When the property values go down, the taxes that the schools in that area receive go down. Not to mention the lack of business opportunities. Nobody wants to come set up shop and provide economic value to a community that has a crime rate like that of a third world country. And every 4 years or so, there's violent protests and they burn down every building on the street. And the local politicians tell the police to step back and just let it happen and even celebrate it. Why would you invest? Let's say you worked your tail off and you managed to accumulate $50,000 and you wanted to set up a business. Where are you going to do it? Are you going to do it where every few years there's riots, then they come and loot and burn down your store? Or are you going to go to a neighborhood that doesn't really have a history of that and set up shop there where hopefully you can hobble along and make a living? Target ain't coming back. Thousands of black-owned small businesses around the country were destroyed, right? And I thought the left's whole philosophy was we need to deconcentrate power from these private industries and get it into the hands of the people so the people can make their own, can have better options, right? They're all about breaking up Walmart, breaking up this. They're not going to break up big tech because big tech is acting in their interest, they think. I think it's going to backfire. And here's the thing. Every time Trump or the conservatives and the more radical in their group do something that I disagree with, somehow the left manages to come along and do something even worse in their response. Over and over again. I don't know how many times I thought I was done.
Hey all, I'm Lee Turner Jr. of Tango Firearms Training, inviting you to join me on Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock for my show, Don't Be a Victim, right here on KHNC 1360, The Roar of the Rockies.
Reasons
to own gold. Reason number 1.
Culturally, the golden rule is treating others as you want to be treated. But financially, the golden rule is those that have the gold make the rules. When you retire, make sure you can write your rules. Call the Patriot Trading Group at 800-951-0592 or visit our website at allamericangold.com.
Smart lights, smart locks, smart thermostats. You love your new connected technology. And the Consumer Technology Association wants to help you protect the security of your devices. First, don't use default or easy-to-guess passwords. Create unique ones and keep them safe. Next, look for and install security updates from device manufacturers. Also, have an active firewall for your home router and consider using a professional installer to set up your new devices. Easy tips from the Consumer Technology Association to help keep your devices secure.
Hi, my name is Lily. My mom and dad used to fight about money all the time. Then one day I heard them talking about this guy, some uncle I never knew called Uncle Sam. Well, they say this Uncle Sam guy wanted them to pay him like $1 gazillion, and they didn't have $1 gazillion. So they called this company they heard on the radio called the Tax Doctor. And the Tax Doctor worked with Uncle Sam's people. I think they're called the IRS. And they were able to work it out so my mom and dad didn't have to pay Uncle Sam very much money at all. So now mom and dad are happy, and I'm happy too. Thanks, Tax Doctor.
If you owe $10,000 or more to the IRS or state, call now and pay less. 800-918-7169. 800-918-7169. That's 800-918-7169.
Are you paying too much for your home, life, or auto insurance? It only takes 10 minutes to find out. Hi, this is Kevin Bowles with Badger Insurance Advisors. Choosing insurance plans can be difficult. That's why I make it easy. I'll make the calls, compare the plans and prices, and find you the insurance plan that fits your needs. Best of all, my help is at no cost to you. Call me today at 303-359-1799 or visit badgerinsuranceadvisors.com. Let me find the right insurance for you.
The Liberty Revolt is founded on strategies to engage in the culture war
and to bring awareness to the threat of radical ideological subversion in the West. Catch our weekly radio show on KHNC Sundays at noon.
LibertyRevoltMedia.com.
The roar of the Rockies.
So where was I? Oh, right. The hypocrisy of the anti-monopoly, anti-private market, anti-free market stance that the left has in regards to any industry, unless they toe the party line, right? The left is absolutely celebrating that conservatives are being shut off of social media, that Parler is being shut down, that these tech companies are trying to enforce a monopoly on social media. The left loves it because they want to be able to control your voice, because they think that human beings are malleable, right? And that by erecting the right public institutions, they can force a worldview onto people that the people will just adopt, and they can change human nature, that human beings won't be greedy anymore so long as they're in charge. Does communist China not run on greed? Did the Soviet Union not run on greed? Where are these angels they're going to find to put in charge of all these institutions? And they can say that they have the best of intentions. I'm sorry, I can't see the halo from here. There's no logical endpoint in the pathway that well-intentioned liberalism leads down. Because if you believe that it's the government's job to solve every injustice in society, well, in order to solve injustices, the government has to accumulate power. And in order to accumulate power, they need to have a monopoly on industry. They need to have a monopoly on force. They need to have a monopoly on wealth. They need to confiscate wealth. And what do they say about power? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is not to say that there isn't a place for progressive thinking individuals to try to establish some level of regulations and some level of wealth redistribution. I will concede that, yes, at a certain point, wealth inequality gets completely out of control and completely destabilizes our economy. I personally think that lower taxes and deregulating the economy will lead to an economy that's more competitive on a global scale so that we actually have a manufacturing base here in the United States. And we're not reliant on China for our PPE. We're not reliant on China for our pharmaceutical medications. We're not reliant on foreign countries that may or may not have our best interest at heart, may not have our best interest at heart. Manufacturing our steel and procuring our oil. Because you can't be free without being self-sufficient. All this talk about rights and all this talk about what the government needs to do and what the government should force other people to do for you, meaningless. Because if you aren't self-sufficient, you aren't free. And yeah, I think that is at the heart of some of the progressive arguments, right? How self-sufficient are you when you can't find a decent paying job in our economy? And especially as we move into the world of self-driving trucks and automated industries, it will be difficult for a lot of low-skill people to find work opportunities, and we do need to take care of them. We need to have conservative solutions for liberal problems, and we need to address the problems that they are pointing out, because it is an issue. Access to healthcare, the cost of healthcare, it is an issue. And if Bernie Sanders is the only one going out there and proposing solutions, people are going to vote for him. You can complain about how a government monopoly is bad, a government monopoly is inefficient, but if people are dissatisfied the way things are, and the only one that is going out there and pounding home those issues is some wild-eyed socialist, we got a problem. We need to have conservative solutions to the climate crisis. Now, I've proposed a couple on past episodes. You can look into that. The environmental, go to libertyrevoltmedia.com and you can find articles we've written on conservative strategies to addressing student debt crisis, conservative strategies to dealing with wealth inequality, conservative strategies to dealing with the environmental crisis. Or is it a crisis? The environmental problem. Clearly we have a problem, right? I'm not going to go along with the idea that all of the science is bunk and they're all paid off and it's all a hoax, right? We have to come up with strategies to address the problems that people hold dear and are going to vote accordingly. But I started talking about how the left believes in more government control so that the government can solve these injustices. There's no logical endpoint because the next left-wing politician needs something to run on. And that's why we're seeing it in real time. Is every election cycle, the left is going further and further and further and further left. And they're going to keep going further and further and further and further left forever because that's what the left does. Because they run on solving injustices and grievance peddling. Now, so does the right. It's kind of a consequence of our electoral process that our politicians are forced into a place to where they're not trying to appeal to everyone. Instead, they're trying to appeal to their niches to their little factions. And so they're forced to run on demagoguery and grievance peddling. That's why it's my number one issue. But the left does the victimhood narrative better. That's why they've taken up the mantle. And of course, they've taken up the mantle of we're for the minority communities and anyone who goes against us is racist. Because if they had to take a look at themselves and realize that, oh, we've had a political monopoly on the black community for 60 to 70 years and have made everything worse. Well, they can't admit that, because then they'll never win again. If that Achilles heel gets exposed. So instead, they have to run on shutting down the opposing opinions and smearing anyone who opposes them as racist. You're racist if you don't go along with us. You're not a racist, are you? And this strategy is incredibly effective on people who aren't paying that much attention to politics and they can't defend their stance. Somebody says, well, I disagree with that. And they say, you're a racist, and people just crumble. That's why the left does it. But no matter how many injustices the government solves, the next up-and-coming left-wing politician needs a new injustice to run on. So they're going to keep going that direction forever. The right has an endpoint. They point to the Constitution. They say, that's it. That's what we want. The government has these few responsibilities. You're listening to KHNC Freedom.
Most people think they can't afford to invest in gold and silver. But at the Patriot Trading Group, we believe that everyone should have the opportunity to own hard assets. That's why we created our Preferred Metals program. You can get started for as little as $100 a month. Go to allamericangold.com and click on our Preferred Metals icon to learn how you can get started today. Or call us at 800-951-0592, the Patriot Trading Group, allamericangold.com.
Reasons to own gold. Brought to you by the Patriot Trading Group at allamericangold.com. Reason number 647.
Most people don't even know that the courts have already ruled. Once money is deposited into the bank owns the money, and the depositor is merely an unsecured creditor of the, which means if the bank goes under, you get paid last. After the financial crisis, instead of breaking up too big to fail, the government and the Federal Reserve created Dodd-Frank and made too big to fail banks even bigger, while putting your deposits more at risk. I'm Joe Jaquint, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group. To learn more, visit us at allamericangold.com or call us at 800-951-0592.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
Now, I've already conceded that there are legitimate roles for left-wing thinkers in the country. We absolutely need people pointing out disparities and discriminations. We absolutely need people pointing to wealth inequalities, pointing to people who are falling behind. But there has been this pathology that has taken over the left, where they have put the means before the ends. And they have put ideological purity ahead of the well-being of the country. That's what cancel culture is all about. They are going to continue shifting the Overton window further and further to the left until nobody to the right of Hillary Clinton is allowed to speak or function in society. Bernie Sanders is far more authoritarian than Donald Trump. Period. Fact. Who's the one that wants to raise your taxes because they believe they can spend your money better than you can? Who's the one that wants to make all of these industries, from the energy industries to the healthcare industry, a government-run monopoly? Who is the one that wants to confiscate your guns? I mean, that just about tells you anything you need to know, right? As soon as a politician starts talking about confiscating the guns, they're basically telling you should not be able to implement force. Mao Zedong boiled his entire political strategy down to a single slogan. Political power comes out of the barrel of a gun. The left knows it. As I said earlier, the left isn't against guns. They're against you having guns. All they want to do is implement taxes and regulations and all these other government constraints to make it so if you disobey them, they can point a gun at you. They want a monopoly on force. They want a monopoly on thought. The left isn't anti-monopoly. Not in any way. Ronald Reagan said, if fascism ever comes to the U.S., it's going to come in the name of liberalism. It's going to come in the name of environmental justice, of social justice, of economic justice. That's what they call it. See, here's one of the defining differences between the left and the right. When they're looking for their model of government, when they're looking into what kind of government philosophy they have in mind and what they're modeling it after, the right points to the past. This was characterized by Edmund Burke, who's considered the forefather of modern conservative thinking. His entire contention was that although we do need change and we need to be flexible as a society, we should make sure that we're implementing changes incrementally over the course of time so that we can see when they produce positive results or negative results, and we can change accordingly so that we don't destabilize our society by changing things faster than people can keep up with. So that we don't mindlessly throw away all of our traditions. Because there is a this is what he contested, there's a silent wisdom in our traditions that has been passed down through the generations and maybe even not fully articulated and put into words. But we've tried many things and we've seen what has failed and what has worked as a civilization for thousands of years. And those traditions have hidden wisdom. And that's why we've chosen to hang on to them. We've just gotten so spoiled that we think this is the norm. This is not the norm. It is a miracle that anything functions at all. Think about it. Think about the amount of physical and intellectual labor that went into creating the world we live in. And consider the fact that everyone has problems. And most people have more problems than us. Everyone's life is a tragedy. Of course you have reason to be resentment, but go ahead, live out that resentment. You'll make everything you're complaining about worse. Edmund Burke said, we should understand history so that we're not doomed to repeat it. Now, we actually have a funny little slogan here on the wall. It says, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. Those who do study history are doomed to sit around helplessly while everyone else repeats it. I think that's pretty funny. It's tragedy, but it's funny nonetheless. The left, they are not basing their governing structure off history. They're basing it off some utopian vision of what the future could be. Right? The right understands that we live in a world of trade-offs. The right understands that human nature is fixed and that humans are susceptible to corruption, and therefore we should not concentrate power in the federal government because that power will be turned against people quickly. And even if the left managed to get in their benevolent Bernie Sanders, which he is not, by the way, even if the left managed to get their their benevolent angel at the helm of government and to concentrate power, and that politician was able to cure some of the injustices without horrific counterproductive downstream effects, unforeseen consequences. You think the power-hungry son of a bitch who comes up after him isn't going to be Stalin? I think it would be. Because it's inevitable. Because the people who are fighting for those, it is the worst, most power-hungry, ruthless people who rise to the top of institutions like that. The Kamala Harrises, the AOCs, the Ilhan Omars, the Rashida Tlaibs. These are the people who will be running your life. You're listening to 1360 KHNC. This is the Bucky Dillon Show, our morning show, right here. Don't go.
Please work with Colorado Right to Life to abolish abortion and not with those who regulate it. For the so-called pro-life regulations convince even our own judges that the unborn child has no true right to life. So we've offered $10,000 to National Right to Life to name a single justice who has ever acknowledged the unborn child's right to life. Tragically, there are none. See that at americanrtl.org/regulations.
Join us and don't miss a moment of the Alex Jones Show, your #1 source for real independent media. Find out what the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. InfoWars is pro-America, pro-family, pro-freedom. We are rebooting 1776. Exclusive reports, live coverage, information you won't find anywhere else. Tomorrow's news today. Stay informed by listening to KHNC 1360 AM.
Alex is here 1 o'clock, Monday through Friday, right here on the Roar of the Rockies.
The Federal Reserve is in control of our money. But lately, control is the last word you would use to describe the Fed. Emergency rate cuts, huge increases in their balance sheet, the constant blowing of bubbles and boom and bust cycles that just leave most of us busted. I'm Joe Jaquin, owner of the Patriot Trading Group, and we have been protecting people's wealth for almost 25 years. Stop playing the Fed's game and get your wealth protected. Call us at 800-951-0592 or visit our website at allamericangold.com.
When a parent struggles with addiction or dies from a drug overdose, what happens to their children? Far too many end up in foster care, unable to ever return to their birth homes because it's simply not safe. The Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption is fighting the clock so that teens don't age out of foster care, leaving them at a higher risk of addiction and other negative outcomes that can happen to a child without the love and stability of a permanent family. Learn more at davethomasfoundation.org.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animated contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsel nor your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains be set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were ever our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
Reasons to own gold. Reason number 725.
The government goes out of its way to make you believe Social Security has an account with your name on it with money just for you. But the Supreme Court ruled that payments due under Social Security are not property rights and are not protected. Social Security is merely a tax, and the government is under no obligations to pay you anything. Call the Patriot Trading Group, 800-951-0592, or visit allamericangold.com.
Guys, if you have questions, comments, concerns, and you want to let me know, send me an email at libertyrevoltmedia@gmail.com. Or if you are on the live stream watching, give me a comment in the comment section, and I will try to get to your questions there. Yesterday, a woman asked me what was going on in DC today. Well, they have now moved in federal troops, and those federal troops are probably going to be much quicker to be called in the future, particularly on Inauguration Day. I imagine they will have them there. A lot of people online were kind of wondering, they were trying to make the case that if these had been Black Lives Matter protests, they would have all been shot dead in the street, which I think is absolute BS. They let Black Lives Matter riot for months on ends and burn down entire city blocks, and hundreds of people were killed. Lots of people were injured. It was an absolute tragedy. We had police officers literally kneeling down with them. We had police officers retreating from the precincts so that left-wing rioters could enter into the buildings and loot them, ransack them, and burn them to the ground. This happened all over the country, and Donald Trump can't just willy-nilly send in federal troops. The reason there wasn't federal troops sent into towns during the Black Lives Matter protests is because he couldn't do it, and the local governors and mayors refused to request them. The reason he was able to send some into Portland and Seattle is because they're within a certain distance of the border, and he does have control of sending a wing of Border Patrol agents to protect cities that are within a certain distance from the border. So that was a different branch. The federal troops in Washington, D.C. were declined by the mayor, Muriel Bowser, a Black Lives Matter, a pro-Black Lives Matter Democrat mayor in Washington, D.C., declined federal troops the day before and said that if they wanted to send any troops in, that they would have to coordinate with the city police, and they would have to go through this whole process. And it wasn't until the Capitol was actually being sacked that people went in, and then she came out and she made excuses for it. And she basically said that, we have protests in DC all the time. Nothing like this is ever. And that's why she didn't think it would be a big problem. Is nothing like this had happened before. And it's true. The right wingers don't take to the streets. And like I said before, I think what happened the other day was counterproductive and disgusting, but at least I would rather see people who are upset at the political establishment take it out on the political establishment instead of going downtown and burning down their neighbor's stores. Guys, this is the Bucky Dillon Show. Go to the YouTube page, subscribe, give it a like, hit the bell so you get the notifications. Tune in every day so you can see my beautiful face and my body that is like that of a Greek god. Guys, thanks for hanging out with me. This is the Bucky Dillon Morning Show. Get a hold of me anytime, libertyrevoltmedia@gmail.com. I enjoyed hanging out with you today. I hope you had a good time. See you tomorrow morning.
Does this corrupt monetary system